After making separate buyer's guide videos for productivity and gaming monitors, one question that I am still asked almost daily down in the comments are, well, I do both gaming and productivity, so which one do I buy? So in this video, I want to help you pick the best overall monitor for both productivity and gaming. Because, well, a benefit of running this channel, of reviewing the latest technology and just reviewing a lot of monitors is that, well, after I'm done filming each video, I get to make the choice of which monitor goes back on my desk after we're done. And most of the time, honestly, it's one particular screen that I keep gravitating towards every single time. Now, lots of the comments I get would favor productivity as the main use case with gaming as the secondary. Because, a lot of my audience will sit at their desk during work during the day, and then once the kids are in bed, they'll clock in some hours gaming. So in this video, I want to help you decide for yourself which monitor is the best for you and talk about each of the key areas to consider when buying a monitor for both use cases. Now, firstly, the one most people start with is, of course, the physical shape and size of the monitor. Now, the most common one is 16:9, which is the same format that pretty much all games and TV shows and movies are shot in. And 16:9 screens typically come in 22, 24, 27, 32 and 55 inch sizes. Then next up, you have 21:9 screens, which are referred to as ultra-wide screens, and they are typically in either 29, 34, 38 and 40 inch sizes. And then we have my favorite category of all these monitors for an all-rounder, the super ultra-wide monitors. And these are 32:9 and come in typically 49 and 57 inch sizes. Plus there are a couple of other formats outside of these. You've got 16:18 and 32:10, which are much less common. Now, generally speaking, the bigger, the better, although that also comes at a cost because you do get more space when you're working on the desktop. Plus, gaming can be more immersive, enemies can be bigger and just easier to spot. But that is just one piece of the puzzle because you could buy a super big monitor, but with a horrendous resolution. So let's talk about it. Now, resolution is a key area when looking for the best overall monitor. And when you combine resolution with another thing, pixels per inch. You've got a high resolution, but low pixel per inch will let you fit a lot on your screen, but it will look very blocky as you can visibly see each individual pixel. A low resolution and low pixels per inch will generally look bad, but perform better for games because it's not having to drive as many pixels. Versus a high resolution and high pixels per inch, which will then fit a lot on your screen, and you also won't be able to visibly see the pixels. However, that does come at a cost for gaming because, again, more pixels means your machine will have to work harder. Now, for 16:9 screens, you get 1080p screens, otherwise known as Full HD, which run at a resolution of 1920 by 1080. You've got 1440p screens, which run at 2560 by 1440, and then 4K screens, which run at a resolution of 3840 by 2160. Now, with some ultra-wide screens, like the 57-inch Samsung Odyssey G9, this is essentially two 4K screens side by side. And so these have a resolution of 7680 by 2160. So it is twice as wide as 4K screens because there are two of them, but it's still the same height. And there is also 5K, which is super high resolution on the smaller screens, and that starts at 5120 by 2880. For productivity, you ideally want a high resolution. Like, I'd recommend 4K at least for most people, and maybe even 5K if you're a creative person who likes to edit photos or videos, just to maximize the amount of space that you have to work with. Now, the problem, again, with going high resolution is that whilst it is great for productivity, it can cause problems for gaming because the high resolution and the more pixels there are, the harder your graphics card has to work. Now, the good news is that you can simply drop the resolution of your monitor when you are gaming until you get to a level of performance that you're happy with. Now, taking my 57-inch Samsung G9 Odyssey as a key example here, to get a decent number of frames per second, you really need a recent generation like 4090 or 5090 GPU to play games at decent quality settings and at the full resolution and full refresh rates. Now, one more thing to note about resolution, especially when talking about these ultra-wide screens, is that some games don't support the ultra-wide resolutions, in which case you'll be left with like black bars down the side when gaming, and other games that do support the resolution, some of them will leave the heads-up display around the edges, which means a ton of head movement to check the mini-map or check your loadout around the edges. Now, some of them do let you move this further in, but again, this is worth checking the games that you actually play before making that decision. Now, once you have the size, resolution, and the PPI nailed, the next important one to decide on is the refresh rates. Before we do though, I've been told that I'm allowed to try and hack something, because this video sponsor, Try Hack Me, has a website where you can learn about cybersecurity by actually hacking real machines. So this should be fun because in my previous life, I actually ran my own IT support business, and a large part of that was cybersecurity protection, where we had a 100% success rate for clients that actually took and implemented our advice, excluding the solicitor who ignored our advice and then got breached to the tune of $500,000. So, Try Hack Me is a 6 million user strong, browser-based gamified cybersecurity learning platform that gamifies learning everything from a complete beginner to more advanced techniques for both offensive, which sounds fun, and defensive roles that prepare you for a career in cybersecurity. Now think of offensive security as something that businesses do to hire like ethical hackers to try and get into their systems, finding holes, which then the business can fix before someone comes along with much less ethical intentions. Now you learn about real scenarios here based on real attacks and real defenses used in the industry today, and you're practicing using real machines. They say to try the offensive security intro, which I really shouldn't fail given my background, so we're just going to see how far we get here. So answer the question below. Which of the following options better represent the process where you simulate a hacker's actions to find vulnerabilities in a system? Offensive or defensive security? Offensive security. Submit. Hey! I haven't forgotten everything yet. And this whole gamification system down the side, it just shows you that it's tracking everything. So it tracks your progress, there are badges and there are leaderboards. So let's go on to number 2, starting the lab. So there's a whole, oh wow, there's a whole lab where it loads up a virtual machine. Deposit money. Success. Return to your accounts.
He's a hacker man.
I think I've done it. And also, if you get stuck, there is Echo, the AI tutor, I believe, who can help you, which I don't think we'll need on this occasion. I'm going to just leave it there so you can head over to Try Hack Me using the link in the description. Many of the rooms they have are free to play, and using code PEACH25, you'll get 25% off the annual plan if you want full access. But that was actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. So I might do a few more of these after we're finished filming this video. What the refresh rate does is essentially it smooths out the motion on your display. Now, if you were to pick up and drag a window, it is the difference of seeing a blur when moving a window to accurately seeing the window move around. Now, typically monitors start off at 60 Hertz refresh rates and then go up to 120, 240, 480, and even higher than that. Now, in productivity, this isn't that important. Like, you could easily get away with a 60 Hertz display, but you can definitely notice an improvement when you switch to 120 Hertz or higher as you just like move windows around on your desktop. Now, for gaming, this is really important because going from say a 60 Hertz display to a 240 Hertz display, like gameplay footage is much smoother and just way more enjoyable to play, and just it allows you to be more accurate with your gameplay. If you are a PC gamer and you have a graphics card that lets you support it, then ideally you want to get the biggest size, the highest resolution, and the highest refresh rate possible. Although a lot of the time you are kind of fighting to pick like 2 out of the 3, you know, much like that triangle that says you can't have good, fast, and cheap. You always have to have sacrifice one of them. Because the higher the refresh rate goes, then you're likely going to sacrifice the resolution because your graphics card just won't be able to push that many frames at a high resolution and a high refresh rate. Now, if you are gaming from a console like a PS5 or Xbox, these consoles currently top out at around 120 Hertz, so you won't be able to benefit from anything above 120 Hertz, so just keep that in mind. And something else for you to check here is that for those of you buying a big high resolution monitor with refresh rates of 240 Hertz or higher, just be sure that your gaming PC is actually powerful enough, because right now, especially at high resolutions, only the very latest and the most powerful PCs will be capable of actually driving those refresh rates at the highest quality possible. So before buying your screen, check the specs of the Mac or the PC you're buying just to make sure it will support those specs. But then again, on the other hand, buying a screen that is too much for your PC to handle today isn't necessarily a bad thing, because, you know, the next time you upgrade your PC, well, you'll already have a great screen and maybe be able to save yourself a few bucks for not having to then upgrade your screen as well at the same time. So now you've nailed your size, the resolution, and your refresh rate, but there is another one which might make you throw everything I've just said out of the window, because the type of panel, the technology that's inside of and behind the actual screen can make a huge difference depending on your use case. Now, you may have heard of terms like IPS, OLED, QD OLEDs, and these are all the types of panel technology which each have their own benefits, but also their own drawbacks. Now, LCD panels are the cheapest, and these come in a few varieties themselves. You've got TN, VA, and IPS. TN panels will be more affordable. They'll probably be the most affordable ones you can buy, which do have fast response times and high refresh rates. So they're generally pretty good and pretty affordable options for pure gaming. VA panels will be brighter and have better contrast than TN panels. And then IPS adds to what VA is capable of, but with much better color accuracy and better viewing angles, with the exception of VA having the edge slightly on contrast. Although the new series of IPS black panels are actually getting very, very close to what VA can deliver. And then we have Mini LED, which offers improved contrast by being able to dim smaller parts of the screen, but still can be problematic with haloing or blooming in high contrast areas. But OLED or OLED takes that contrast to a whole new level by being able to switch off individual pixels to create a truly stunning contrast and just picture quality where blacks are well and truly black. Now, OLED panels are also thinner and therefore lighter and consume a lot less power, but they are traditionally not as bright as others. And you can also potentially suffer from burn-in on those screens. Whereas if you say, left one image permanently on that screen, eventually it may burn it into the screen itself. Now, generally speaking, I feel like most monitors kind of get bright enough now where you can see them in even the brightest of environments, unless you are, literally sat outside in the sun all day. And the general consensus is that OLED, whilst it looks the best, again, some people avoid due to that risk of burn-in. So then others opt for IPS and the newer IPS black LCD panels instead, or Mini LED, but then you have to put up with some significant haloing around bright white text that doesn't happen on OLED. Now, with that said, and just to complicate things even more, there are different generations of OLED. More recently, there are 4th generation tandem OLED screens hitting the market, which fix many of the drawbacks when it comes to traditional OLED monitors. One of those being burn-in. So let's talk about that. Now, burn-in is what traditionally happens when one image is left on the screen for too long so that the pixels can visibly burn that image into the screen. As those pixels which are the brightest age the fastest than the ones which aren't. Say you're a pixel and you've been red the whole of your life. Then as you get into your old age, you're told you now need to be a green pixel because the image has changed. Well, you might have forgotten how to be green, so you might take longer to get to green, or you might just never get there because you've forgotten what green is. Now, this was very common back in the days with plasma TVs, if you're old enough to remember that. And it does still happen with OLEDs, but it's a lot less common and requires a lot more effort to do so. But if you are someone who works in Windows or Mac, or maybe plays one game where certain parts of the screen don't change with the minimap, then this is something that you might worry about. 4th generation tandem OLEDs add additional layers, which means that screens can go brighter, colors are actually separated, so technically speaking, these will be less susceptible to burn-in, although it is still too early to say one way or another. And pretty much all OLED monitors nowadays have protection built in, which you can find in the menu settings to have the monitor move pixels around and periodically on the screen, almost imperceptible to the eye, to just stop pixels getting burnt in or just stuck one way or another. Now, really, the only thing you can do now is to make sure that the warranty on the monitor you buy covers burn-in, with most of them covering at least 2 to 3 years worth of burn-in. Only exception to this rule, and which flips this whole thing on its head, is that, well, at least here in the UK, TV warranties are vastly better and longer than monitor warranties. We're talking 2 to 3 year warranties on monitors compared to 5 to even 6 years for a TV, either directly from the manufacturer or from places here such as Richer Sounds or John Lewis, which would normally give you an extra 1 year warranty included in the price. But you can also buy additional warranties for that protection. Now, this just opens up a whole new world of options when it comes to monitors. Now, I've talked about using a TV as a monitor a number of times on the channel here. And whilst you can get stupid with using, 60 plus inches, there are still monitors worth considering.
Wow, this thing is big. This is ridiculously big. I don't really even know where to look.
Again, factoring in things like the screen size, the resolution, and the refresh rates. You also have response time, which is a very important factor when it comes to gaming, but less for productivity. Now, this is essentially how fast what's on screen changes from one color to another, and so how fast what's on screen reacts to what's happening in the actual game you're playing. Now, again, for productivity, this is basically meaningless in today's world, as any screen will be more than fine here. But for gaming, ideally, the smaller the number here, the better. And many screens nowadays are able to reach as low as 0.0 0.03 milliseconds in their response time, which is just very, very fast. But there is one debate that is raging on and continues to rage on that nobody can actually agree with, and that is anti-reflective coatings. Now, a lot of people want a glossy display because that has the least impact on the image quality. But the downside is that it then reflects any other lights around you, which can be very distracting, especially in bright environments or you have big windows or bright lights around you. So many manufacturers now are adding anti-reflective coatings on their screens. And honestly, the latest screens from Samsung are seriously impressive when it comes to preventing glare and reflections from around you. I actually went to a display at Samsung's KX store in London, which was set up right next to this massive window, and you could clearly see what was going on those screens. But these coatings do impact the image quality ever so slightly. And this is why a lot of people just don't like these anti-reflective matte coatings. And this is very much a personal choice here. So you either go for glossy for the most accurate, best quality, which are best when perhaps you're in a dark room, like when you're gaming, maybe at night, where you can switch off all the lights. Or you go for the anti-glare or anti-reflective coatings, which makes them far more usable during the daytime. Now, honestly, Samsung, especially here, I think, really have some of the best anti-reflective coatings here, which very minimally impact the image quality. But again, this is a personal choice. Something else to consider, or actually in some case, a real concern for people, is any curve that is on their screen. Now, especially when it comes to anything over, say, 38 inches in size, a lot of these larger monitors come with a curve, because depending on how far away you are sat from your monitor, things around the edges of the screen just get pretty difficult to see because it's so far away. You have to lean over to see the edges, and you can also then get glare and reflections if you don't have that curve. But what do the numbers mean, and how much curve should you be looking for? Now, in terms of how it works, a smaller number means a bigger curve. So an 800R curve would be a deeper curve than, say, an 1800R curve. Now, my recommendation would be the bigger the monitor, then look for a bigger curve. Now, I saw this on the 49-inch Samsung G9 ultra-wide, which has a 1000R curve, which was, in my eyes, perfect. And then they released a newer version, but with an 1800R curve, which then I bought it, I used it for a bit, and I found it less comfortable to use due to having to lean to see the far edges of the screen, even though it was curved. Now, I have used monitors all the way up to 800R curves, and I'm yet to find a curve that honestly I think is too much. So I would personally say this is a bit of a moot point. This isn't really an issue whatsoever. Just go with all the other specs first, and if the one you've picked out happens to have a curve, then it's probably going to be fine. Now, one thing that is a critical area to cover is connectivity. If you are a MacBook user, then ideally you want USB-C or Thunderbolts, since this will do both display and charging in one cable. If you're a Mac desktop user or a console gamer, then it's quite likely you're going to be going via HDMI. And if you're on Windows, then it's probably DisplayPort or HDMI. Now, if your monitor doesn't have USB-C, don't worry, because even though I am using, and still today using the 57-inch Samsung G9, which doesn't have USB-C, I then have a CalDigit TS5, which has a DisplayPort output. So I plug in one USB-C cable into my MacBook for display and charging, and then the dock connects to my screen. Just again, a word of caution here. Make sure that your dock supports whatever resolutions and refresh rates that you're hoping to achieve. Both HDMI and DisplayPort have their own standards. The latest being 2.1, but previously HDMI 2.0 and DisplayPort 1.4. Now, without getting too technical here, a lot of monitors, pretty much all of them, still use display stream compression, or DSC, to compress the data it sends via the display cable to the monitor, which, when you're trying to achieve, a mixture of high resolution with high refresh rate, is kind of impossible unless you have a graphics card, a monitor, and a cable that all supports the very latest standards. Now, the only reason why I'm not going to go too much into detail here is that for the majority of people, you won't even notice this. It just happens in the background. You won't notice any difference in image quality. But for those people who are savvy to understand what DSC is, then I'd recommend just checking if and how exactly DSC is implemented with the monitor you're planning to buy first. Now, the only other thing to consider here is that if you are working on one device during the day and then gaming on a second device in the evening, then just make sure you have enough ports. One device may need to connect via DisplayPort and the other via HDMI if you only have one of each ports. Now, if you are using two devices, then there are also some features that you will definitely want to check out. And those are KVM, which stands for Keyboard, Video and Mouse, and picture-in-picture or picture-by-picture. Now, some monitors have the ability to connect and display two devices at once, either side-by-side, which is called picture-by-picture, or picture-in-picture, where there's one small window inside of the big full screen window. Now this can be useful if switching maybe between Mac and PC or gaming console and desktop PC, just maybe like work and personal machine. And then some of these come with the ability to hook up USB devices directly to the monitor. And then you can switch inputs from one computer to another, and those USB devices move across with them as well. So you can use one keyboard, one mouse between two computers. Then aside from those features, there are a few others to cover. Built-in speakers, convenient, yes, good. No, you're just far better off hooking up your own headphones or your own speakers. And LED lighting, also totally pointless. They can look cool, but since most of us just push our screens up against the wall, you are far better off getting something like the Govee AI Sync Box, which properly has proper bright LEDs to stick onto the back of your monitor instead. Now, in terms of which monitors I would personally recommend to you, because this is what I get asked all the time in the comments section. For 2 years straight now, I have still been using the 57-inch Samsung Odyssey G9. Even though it's not OLED, and that does suck, I actually use the 45-inch 2025 LG Ultra Gear for about 6 months. And it's great, the OLED colors on it are incredible. Only reason I didn't switch back to the Samsung sooner was just because I was being lazy and I had to swap it all over again and take my desk apart. So I would say if you are mainly into productivity and then play a little gaming in the evenings, pick up the 57-inch Samsung G9. It is incredible and there are some great discounts on it right now. Now, if you're only into productivity, and especially Mac or laptop users, then again, the 57-inch G9 or the Dell U40 Thunderbolt monitor, which has a built-in Thunderbolt dock. And if you are more into your gaming, but also do a bit of productivity, then the 45-inch LG Ultra Gear is a clear winner here. Now, I hope that buyer's guide helped answer any of your questions. If you do have any other questions, feel free to ask them in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out Try Hack Me via the link in the description down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, bye-bye.